So the sneak peek leak for Boruto 2 Blue Vortex chapter 28 has just been released. And what we do end up seeing in this sneak peek page is something that is quite interesting, and it's not good signs when it comes to protecting the world from the worst future to take place. But let's just dive on deep to the sneak peek page, as this is what we end up seeing. We see Boruto rushing forward, indicating that battle is about to take place. And we have Shikamaru who says this: "Damn it, this is several days ahead of schedule." With Kashin Koji who continues by saying that's just how this kind of thing works. Fate has already begun to change. Inogen is most likely around Kashin Koji, as we see them in around this similar dark background, or he is the one who is simply allowing this communication to take place. We end up going to Kawaki, who says, "Just you wait, shitheads," which implies that Mamushi has indeed made his way in the village and has begun to attack. So, what is quite interesting to discuss here is something that I've been discussing in my past few videos. The fact that the future is indeed taking the worst outcome. Everything that we're seeing right now is leading to this worst outcome that Kashin Koji fears, which will ultimately lead to Ida being devoured. Whether this ends up taking place or not is what we're going to discover in these next few chapters, but already we are in bad signs. As just like what was hinted towards in the last chapter, Mamushi's attack is taking place ahead of schedule. And this is something that some people may have missed due to the official translations, but this is why I always like to go and look at various different translations, as the official translations was a little bit too vague when it came to this specific subject, as it was actually hinted in the Japanese text. As with other translations that were released to read, we had Kashin Koji who outlined a timeline of Mamushi attacking in 2 days or around a week in between that scenario. And then in the final page of the chapter, we have the narrator's speech bubble, which ends up saying that Mamushi's attack takes place 2 days after, most likely 2 days after Boruto's conversation with Sumire. This was an important detail that the official translations were quite vague on and didn't really explore what the narrator was actually saying when it came to the real Japanese text. So I stressed this in past videos, and this ended up being the case. The fact that the translations with the officials were actually a little too vague and skipped around when it came to that specific part, which does end up indicating that yes, we are moving in the worst possible outcome in the beginning of the arc. And this is already just one of the many differences between this arc and the arc that took place in the past. And I'm talking about the Sand arc, the arc where we ended up having Sarada awaken her Mangekyo Sharingan. And this is clearly a bad sign. So when it comes to us moving towards the rich future, this is the first step, Mamushi's attack taking place ahead of schedule. But that's not the only thing that we end up learning when it comes to this sneak peek page, as we do end up seeing something quite interesting, and that is Boruto with what appears like to be a sword. Is this another deviation of the future taking place right now, or is this something a little bit different? This basically leaves us with 2 possible options to explain why Boruto has his sword. The first one is that of Sumire actually working ahead of schedule. It was told to us that Boruto's sword being upgraded and completely changed and fixed will most likely take a week. This is what Sumire ends up telling us, and this is due to the simple fact that Boruto's sword is going to be fundamentally changed based off the scroll information that Boruto ended up giving to Sumire. Sumire said it would take a week. Well, in this page, we see that Boruto has a sword. So the first option is that Boruto's sword was simply made in time, 2 days from now, as this was what was hinted towards in that translation page. And this is indeed an option, the fact that Boruto's sword was fixed in time, being another deviation from the future fate that we have, but in my personal opinion, I don't believe that this option is viable, due to the simple fact that it didn't really seem like Sumire was really giving Boruto an option of how fast she could fix it. I don't believe it is similar to the conversation that Kashin Koji had with Inogen, where Kashin Koji told Inogen to master his ability in 2 days, and then we have an Inogen who replies by saying that he could do it in 1. We didn't really get that same scenario with Sumire and Boruto's conversation, where Boruto was completely fine with the fact that Sumire would take a week. So I don't believe that Boruto's sword that he has here is his new and upgraded sword. It's not Sasuke's sword at all. What I do believe is a viable option is option 2. The fact that Boruto may be using a completely different sword. He is not currently using Sasuke's sword or an upgraded version of that sword. As Boruto, who is a Kenjutsu master, as he has mastered Kenjutsu style from Sasuke, he most likely has other swords. We see that in the training arc that Boruto had with Sasuke, he had a sword of his own. And although the design did look a bit similar to Sasuke's, we do know that it was fundamentally different, as we end up seeing that Boruto ends up picking up Sasuke's sword after the fight that he has versus Code. So I'm not necessarily saying that it is the exact same sword that Boruto had when he was training with Sasuke, as we do end up seeing in the fight versus Code, where Sasuke ends up being turned into a tree, that Boruto's sword was actually broken. So Boruto is definitely not using the same broken sword that he had in the past. I do believe that maybe he is using a spare sword. Maybe in the Orochimaru hideouts, they do end up finding other swords that Orochimaru may have laid there, as we do see that they do have some level of equipment. We do see in their base that they have a sofa, just a little bit of extra supplies that they have around there. I don't believe that they have nothing that Boruto could use as a spare sword. Maybe ends up picking up one of those weapons, but it does tell us that it's not going to be the same quality of sword that Sasuke has. So maybe we should expect a little bit of a nerf when it comes to Boruto and his sword ability when it comes to this upcoming arc. This is definitely possible. But it also does tell us that we're not going to see Boruto personally fight with a different fighting style. We're not going to see him revert back to using the shadow clones, and we're most likely not going to see him use any sort of kunai, unless we see Boruto end up giving Momoshiki control, where he is now the one to dictate how exactly fights, and we see Boruto fight completely differently. But what we're currently seeing is that Boruto is going to keep his Kenjutsu, which has been something that he has mastered and been practicing for years. So it makes sense that for such an important battle, he's not going to go back to something that he hasn't trained for years. He's going to keep maintaining that, although it is most likely going to be with a different sword. So there is a possibility that maybe the future has changed in also a good way. We have both the good and the bad of the future changes, where one of the bad changes that is being outlined in this page is the fact that we have Mamushi's attack that is taking place a lot sooner. But a good thing about this future is that Boruto's sword ends up being made a lot sooner. This is definitely a possibility, but I just don't see it being hinted toward that being the case in the past chapter. So I'm leaning with option 2, that of Boruto using a different sword completely, a replica maybe, but something that is a lot weaker or just not the same to the sword that he's been using and the sword that is currently being upgraded. But the next thing that we learn in this sneak peek page is the fact that Kawaki, yes, he is indeed going to be involved in this upcoming arc. And the way I see how things are going to move, especially with Mamushi's abilities, is that we're going to see something quite similar to the Pain arc, where the fight between Mamushi, although it is basically one person going there, but he has this cloning ability, I do believe that we're going to see a replica of the fighting style that Pain had, where it first started off as an ambush, meaning that we have Mamushi who goes around with his various clones, maybe a smaller unit than 20 or 30, which is ideal for Kashin Koji, maybe around 10 that are spread around in the village, which causes different factions of people who are going to be necessary to be outlined around the leaf, and not just go to a central location. The more and more these clones spread, the closer and closer they're going to draw together, and ultimately it's going to reach a point where those who end up surviving or not taking the most damage, when Mamushi reaches this ideal level of clones of around 30 to 40, he is going to be fought against multiple different opponents in this central location, where most likely Boruto, Kawaki, the likes of Sarada, Energen if he potentially makes it, are going to be the people who he ends up fighting at that given point. And then, if he is to be defeated, it is then that will take place. But what we're going to see first happen is him move towards Ida. And with the future already looking like it is going down the worst path, I do believe that this is the future, or this is the arc where we see Mamushi, one of the Senju, take their first W and actually devour somebody. Ida, as I've said, there was a lot of dead flags for Ida personally, where she could potentially be the person who ends up being devoured by one of the Senju. And as we're currently seeing is being foreshadowed, there's a clear difference. This arc, compared to the last one, we didn't see such a deviation in the future happen so early on. The deviation in the future that we did end up seeing take place only happened after Boruto ended up making a move where we had Kashin Koji who ended up getting an update of the future. And this is where we had to discuss Kashin Koji's ability, as if fate has already begun to change and Kashin Koji has not yet been updated on that future scenario. It possibly means that Kashin Koji's future that he has seen may not necessarily link up exactly like he has seen it in that past update that he received. And we do know that Kashin Koji gets updates periodically. The last one, the only interval we've ever been given was 6 days, and we know that we're only 2 days into this new future that we're embarking on. So it doesn't mean that Kashin Koji may have seen an updated future for now. But the future that we are going to, due to fate already changing, may be one that Kashin Koji is blind to, which leads to different scenarios taking place and us seeing things differently than we have seen Kashin Koji explain to us. And this personally leads me on to somebody like Code, who I do believe is going to be active in this arc. We do see one appearance, or at least some sort of an appearance of Code every arc, and I do believe we could see one. And this is one that will ultimately lead towards Kashin Koji's death or Kashin Koji's temporary removal from the arc, where he is no longer going to be in contact with Boruto forever or periodically, because Code has made an appearance, and Code is going to be the person who has been already tasked by Jira to defeat the likes of Kashin Koji. So that is what we could potentially see as another deviation for the future, where Kashin Koji ultimately ends up giving Boruto his last future update, where due to a great deviation that took place, similarly to Kawaki appearing in the fight between Boruto versus Jira, we have Kashin Koji also get an update when Code makes an appearance towards him right before his death, where he ends up giving Boruto his last updated future, and from then on passes on his will to Boruto. This is definitely something that we could see take place, and it'd be a good way for Code to be included in this arc, and it actually makes sense that Kashin Koji does not know. So these are my current thoughts on the sneak peek page that has been released. You guys let me know your own personal opinions on everything that was discussed in this video. It's been your boy Dynasty, and I'm out, bruh.